controller, so he definitely speaks the language and loves to hear from our members. So if you ever need anything, you can absolutely email him. His contact information will be at the end of be provided at the end. And then also when the webinar is over, probably within about 24 hours, I will send out a follow-up email with materials and with a link to the recording, so you can watch it again or pass it around, share it with your staff. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. If you're new to this GoToMeeting tool, if you look at the upper right of your screen, you'll see a small red arrow. If you click that arrow, it opens kind of a control panel on the right, and down towards the bottom you will see a chat box where you can type a message. I'll be keeping an eye on that box, so if you have a question, you can type it in there, and I'll make sure that Jim responds to it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Boyle.
Hello, everybody. I certainly appreciate you taking the time today. This is going to be about a half an hour long, and I would say we're going to break it down into thirds. The first third of the meeting will really be getting to the report and looking at some of the mechanics of the site. The second part of the meeting will be looking at the report itself, and then I want to leave time for questions toward the end. Certainly, if you have a question in the process, if you could use that chat box, we'll try to address them as we go along. And just so you know, I'm going to leave the settings so that your microphone will be muted. So if you do want to ask a question, please use that chat box in the GoToMeeting control section. So thanks again. I appreciate your time. When you log into the site, you'll come to the main screen. We're going to look at the comp and benefits section today, obviously. But I just want to point out very quickly that we have a support link at the top right portion of the screen. When you click the support link, it opens a separate tab. It gives you my phone number right here, and it also gives an email link that you can use to ask questions or request support help. As Terry said, you're welcome to call me or email us anytime you're using Club Benchmarking. Really, our objective is to keep you using the site for decision-making and strategic planning, so we don't want you getting stuck. So if you have a question, please do not hesitate to call. Today, we're going to look at the compensation and benefits section, in particular the compensation benefits report. I just want to point out on the support page, we have an executive compensation white paper. It's a relatively short white paper. It's about 3 pages long. And the conclusion of the study is that there's one thing that is statistically correlated to executive compensation at private clubs, and that is size, which is to say revenue range of the club. Clubs that are tens of millions of dollars in revenue pay differently than clubs that are a few million. People think that compensation and benefits is correlated to the area of the country or the cost of living or any number of other factors, and there is some influence, but as far as any statistical correlation, it really is about the size of the club. And just a very little bit of background, brief story, I did a walkthrough with a club in a very high-cost area recently. We looked at comparisons, and before we looked at the comparisons, the person said, well, we have to pay a premium because it costs so much to live here that we just have to pay differently than other people. And I said, that sounds like it makes a lot of sense. Let's take a look at the numbers. We did the comparisons, and when we looked at the executive positions, the executive position salary at that club was about the median of the sample that we looked at, and the sample that we looked at was around size of club. So it really is borne out in real life based on my personal experience, and we'll talk about that when we look at the report. So I shifted from the support page back to the main screen. On the main screen, you can navigate to any one of the three areas by using these icons, or you can use the pull down. We're going to go to the compensation and benefits section. In the compensation and benefits section, as with the finance and operations and policies and procedures, it's broken down into three subsections. My Club is for the data entry. Compare Clubs allows you to make comparisons on a data point by data point basis for the various positions in this case. And then My Reports is the section that we're going to start from. And we have pre-written reports for executive salaried and hourly compensation with filters. So the filters allow you to select the sample of clubs that you would like to compare against. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, executive compensation is correlated statistically to the revenue size of the club. And for that reason, today, when I set the filters, I'm going to set the filters for the report around revenue. And in this case, we're looking, this demonstration data is set up to as if it's a golf club. So again, My Club allows you to do the input. Compare Clubs, we can look at role by role, and My Reports are the pre-written reports. One quick comment on the data input. We have on any one of the data input pages, we have a copy prior year data link to help you speed the update of your data as the year changes over. We have 2014 open, so I would certainly encourage you to fill out the 2013 data if you haven't already, but also it's very quick to update the information into 2014 by using the copy prior year data function. When I click on it, the program looks at the database from the prior year, sees if there is a data point in that entered in that prior year that has not been input into the page that we're on, and autofills. So it will not, if you put in information, it will not overwrite the information that you have in, but it will fill any blanks. It's a very simple thing to make changes to whatever might have changed on that page, and then you can do submit or submit and next, and that's updated to the database. So I wanted to point that out for two reasons. One is, first, we have the 2014 open, so you can go ahead and start entering that information. And the other is to show the functionality and the fact that we're trying to afford tools that will speed the process. In each of these roles, the template is the same. So we ask the same set of questions, and many of the answers will not change from one year to the next. So that can really speed the process. I would like to now go to the reports. I'm going to run the report. I'm going to run the executive report, that is. Before I do, I'm going to set a revenue range. And by the way, this club is a large, the example here is of a large club. It has almost $14 million in revenue. Right now, I'm in the finance and operations section. Under the uniform income statement, in My Club is the data entry, because I wanted to illustrate the basis that I'm going to use for the filters. So for the total club revenue at 13.8, Elizabeth asks that says that they have a fiscal year that ends June 30. Do the salary and wages go into 2014-15, or do they go into 2014 numbers in 2015? So my answer is that when you are entering salary information, most clubs enter the salary information for the calendar year because that's when the increases and the changes occur. For the June 30 clubs, the June 30 2014 fiscal year end is considered 2013 database year. So for the information related to fiscal year ended June 30, that would be entered in the 2013 database in general. But in the comp and benefits section, most clubs enter the information for the calendar year as the pull down is. So I hope that answers the question. And by the way, I thank you very much for asking that question, because that's one that consistently comes up. If somebody asks it, I don't have to remember to make that point. So I've gone back to the compensation and benefits section. I'm going to go to my reports. I'm going to set a filter range from 10 to, we saw it was about $14 million in revenue. I'm going to set a revenue range 10 to $20 million, which is would encompass larger clubs in general. And in this case, this is a golf club. So I slide the bars to get to the values that I want, and I do the pull down to get yes. Then I can click apply. And by the way, if this is a filter setting that you'd like to come back to, you can save it as a favorite. And I recommend that so that when you come back in with one click, you can reset the filters to the prior setting. If you do not save it as a favorite, when you log out of the site, all the filters are reset to the defaults. You just have to set them up again. I set the range from 10 to 20 million with golf. It shows that we are going to compare against 100 clubs. It's not a fact that 100 clubs will have entered data for every one of the roles, but there are 100 clubs in the database that are between 10 and 20 million and have golf. I'm going to click on the report. The report is generated by the system quite quickly, and we're going to shift from the internet to my desktop. When the report is compiling, I can open it up with a click. This is in PowerPoint, so you can edit the cover sheet. It always shows the name of the club and the name of the report that we're running. It shows who ran it, and also it shows the filter settings. When you choose a favorite, then it tells you the favorite and the name of the favorite. That can be a little bit redundant and not entirely clear, so I tend to delete out that label because here are the filter settings: 10 million to 20 million, clubs with golf. Some people like to know the number of clubs that we're comparing against, and that's quite simple to type in. I'm terrible at typing, so I'm not going to type it all in, but you can see that you can type that in. When you click on one of the data charts, the data cannot be edited in the report. It can be changed in the database. It's a live database, so you can use it for what-if planning and make changes. We ask you, if you use it for that purpose, to change it back to the historical data, but these numbers cannot be changed. So for the 100 clubs that are being compared, each of the data points is along this line. We cut off the top 5% and the bottom 5%, so you can't narrow the sample down to a small handful of clubs and identify any one club's information. We obviously have a responsibility to maintain confidentiality of your data, and that's one of the ways that we do. I will say that you can add text boxes and make notes as you care to on the page. So if you want explanation of any chart, you can certainly do that. But again, the numbers in the chart itself cannot be changed. So with that, I am going to shift to the slideshow. In the executive compensation report, we always show some background information. This club has almost 14 million in revenue. It's larger than 2/3 of the clubs in the range from 10 to 20 million. We look at the total F&B revenue to give a scale of the food and beverage operation. And again, this club is at the higher end of the scale. It's a very large food and beverage operation. We look at annual dues rate for the full family member so that we can get some context and people can understand some more of the important information of the clubs that you're comparing against and where your club falls. We don't have this data point entered, but the full-time equivalents at this club are quite large as well. So this is background information to set the context of the report. Then we come to the actual charts about the roles. So for each of the roles, we show the total compensation, we show the salary, and then we show the cash bonus as compared to the other clubs in the sample. So whereas the club was somewhat larger in revenue, this person who is the head of the club their salary is approximately the median. As we go through the report, there are a series of 3 or 4 charts for each role that look at some aspects of the compensation. The next one is the bonus and benefits, obviously. And then we look at things like the tenure, both in the profession and in the current position. And for the head of club, we also look at what the total salary bonuses and benefits represents as a percentage of the total operating revenue. And you can see, again, on any one of these charts, the information for this club is shown as a specific point on the line with a value, and then we show the quartiles. And by the way, each of these charts are shown in percentiles, which is to say that half of the clubs fall below the median, and half of the clubs, or half of the general managers in this case, fall above. Half fall between the 25th percentile and 75th percentile. And in this case, we show the exact percentile for this person's compensation as a percent of revenue, which is the 31st percentile. As we go through the chart report, if a role is not completed, you can see the background data, the comparative data, but obviously there is no dot or data point charted for this club because the CFO position was not populated. When you run a report, if you would like to share it with anybody, but you don't necessarily want the blank charts, although sometimes that can be useful information to understand the industry medians and ranges for roles that you may be considering filling, for example. But if you want to, it's quite simple to just delete the charts that you do not want to include in the presentation. So going back to the report, I just shifted obviously back to the edit function from the presentation, and I have a question that's been posed, which is there a way to add in other job titles to get information? For example, I'm looking for an event planner salary range, and that is not included. So the answer is that the roles that we capture information for are these in the list. So I'm in the My Club, which is the data entry. GM is always the default, and then these are the positions that we can enter information for in the database. These are the roles that Club Managers Association had been gathering data on before we started to provide the database engine, and they're the ones that we have continued. We're absolutely open to suggestions about anything that should be added to the site and or changed in the report, by the way. So we really look for your input for those kind of suggestions. What my suggestion in the case of the event planner would be is to look at the list and see what you think might be the closest comparative role if you don't have specifically. So, for example, we don't have the event planner in this list. What I've suggested to member clubs in a case like that is you could certainly enter the information against the catering manager for comparative. You may even compare it against the food and beverage director or clubhouse manager just for comparative sake. And that is one of the values of this database. It's a live database. When you enter information, then you can compare against it. But again, if we don't have that particular position, please feel free to call us, email us, make the suggestion. We will definitely look into it and see if it makes sense to add. We often do that. We do have to be careful about the number of roles and how finely we define them, because obviously one of the things that we want to do is build a statistically significant sample of roles to compare against or input to compare against. So event planner is a common position that's staffed at clubs that have a large-scale catering operation, but not necessarily, at clubs that are more have a lower scale operation or are more member dining kind of oriented. So again, it's a process of balancing the amount of information we ask for from clubs with the amount that we will gain, the number of clubs that will actually have the role, and then the value of the comparisons. So that's a long-winded way to say my suggestion is pick a couple of roles that come as close as possible, fill in information, and make comparisons in that way, and that can provide you quite a bit of information in your analysis. Thank you very much for the question. So without going through the report slide by slide, the charts are repeating for each of the role. We ask for compensation, or we show compensation, then benefits in bonus, and then tenure, and then go to the next role sequentially. One recommendation that I have, or we certainly first recommend that when you run the report, that you look at the comparisons around revenue range. But there's no question that there's great value in looking at the comparisons using different filter settings. Any data point in the database can be a filter setting, and if you don't see one that you need, please let us know. One club had a very large-scale tennis operation, and they wanted to compare against other clubs that had a large-scale tennis operation, so they asked us to add a filter for the number of tennis courts, and that's why you see it here, actually. And they set it for 20 or more, and they knew they were comparing against other clubs of the same scale. For particular roles, especially around the food and beverage role, you may want to look at comparisons around the food and beverage revenue. We observed with this club that it has a very large food and beverage operation, $5 million. So we may want to compare against clubs on the same scale for the chef or the food and beverage director. So please, by all means, use the filters in different settings to look at the data from a number of different perspectives, because I think it will give you very valuable information. So now I'm going to pause and take a breath and ask if anybody else has a question. There being none, I would like to, or if somebody's typing furiously and I'm running ahead of them, I'll certainly give you more time. but I know that I have done an overview with many of you, and I appreciate your time that you've taken to do that. For those of you who have not signed up for an overview or a walkthrough, as we call it, please go right ahead, go to the support page. We have a link to our training schedule. You can click on that link. It brings you to our calendar. You can pick a time and day, and you will get a link for this for a GoToMeeting session. I'll show up and we'll spend an hour talking about whatever you want to talk about. But I absolutely encourage you to make use of that resource. I think it's a very valuable thing, and it's an opportunity to answer specific questions that you may have about your club. I absolutely appreciate your time today. I think it's a fantastic thing that you want to take time out of your schedule. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And I certainly look forward to working with each of you individually. And with that, I conclude today's session. Thanks again.